Chapter 62. When the police arrived at the villa, it was still dark. In the brightly lit villa, a burly man was lying on the floor, blood still oozing from the back of his head, and a few pieces of the table lamp stuck to his head could be seen. The girl sitting on the sofa calmly answered the police's questions. The situation was very clear. Eddie Caputo, the murderer, had escaped in the early morning yesterday. When he was cornered, he thought of a way to escape into a civilian's house. After observing all night, he thought that this large villa with only a weak girl and an immature boy was the best place to strike. The murderer Eddie sneaked into the villa in the middle of the night, intending to threaten the owner of the house to have a temporary shelter and rest, and then planned to escape from Derry Town. The moment the murderer rushed out, I really didn't know what to do. But my little brother rushed over and bravely fought him. The bruises on his body were also caused by that thug during the fight. It was thanks to his help that I had the chance to use the desk lamp to knock him out. His arms and legs were all broken by us. Anyway, my little brother and I are both law-abiding citizens. We've never encountered something like this before. I was afraid he hadn't completely passed out, so I hit him a few more times, but if he was a murderer, then we probably wouldn't have any trouble, right? My little brother and I were just defending ourselves. The policeman who was taking notes looked at the little boy who was also sitting on the sofa with a listless face and empty eyes, along with the obvious bruises on his exposed arms. His eyes showed appreciation. After he finished taking notes, he patted him on the shoulder and praised, "Good job, you did it, you are a brave and mature boy, but next time pay attention to safety, learn from your sister." The boy with short platinum hair trembled unconsciously, sitting up straight. The muscles on his face twitched slightly, his lips trembled, his eyes swept over the girl who was calmly sitting opposite him. Her eyes suddenly revealed a look of pain, as if there was nothing left to live for. "How does it feel to be surrounded by police, but you can't ask for help?" The bruises on his body were still aching. Belch's eyes were empty, desperately looking at Siddle standing up to see the police off. Even though he knew that the man who fell on the floor was a fugitive murderer, Belch still couldn't relax his fear and vigilance towards Siddle. Belch was now convinced that Siddle was a pervert with brutal methods. Although there was no concrete evidence, he deeply felt that if he had not intervened at that time, Siddle might not have called the police or would have directly killed the murderer on the spot. His thoughts kept wandering, even starting to wonder why the murderer didn't come to another house, but to his. Perhaps, Siddle had known Eddie before, and then Eddie's identity was exposed, so Siddle, with cruel tricks, planned to personally kill his former accomplice. Before the police arrived, the miserable boy who was cruelly beaten by Siddle thought of enduring this humiliation, kneeling down to acknowledge his sister first, and then waiting for the day to expose Siddle's true face. But his illusion was accidentally shattered by Siddle. "I know what you're thinking." She took out her cell phone from Belch's pocket, turned it on, her blue eyes indifferently looked at the screen, then quietly looked up at him. What happened next, Belch didn't want to remember anymore. In general, it was a very bad experience. To the point that when he saw the police, he no longer had any intention of calling for help. Even his mother didn't believe him, and Belch didn't have any hope for the police in this small town. After all, his bad reputation had spread for a long time. On the stretcher, a white cloth covered the bloody body of the murderer, Eddie Caputo, who had been officially arrested, and his accomplice Ray had been shot dead in the toy store yesterday. This case was officially over. But for Belch, this was just the beginning of a hellish life. After seeing the police off, Siddle returned to the villa. She glanced over indifferently. Belch unconsciously sat up straight, his face tense. Straight, only the hands placed on his knees were slightly trembling, revealing his inner thoughts. The blonde girl yawned lazily, rubbed her eyes, and said gloomily, "What are you doing sitting there? Did I beat you to the point of paralysis? Don't you see the blood on the floor? If you don't clean up, how will I sleep?" Belch, he muttered in response, not daring to say anything more, stood up and walked towards the cleaning supplies storage. Belch now truly believed that Siddle had been a school bully in the past. Looking at the extremely skilled way she ordered others around, one could tell at a glance that she was used to being a boss. Belch was very familiar with this kind of school bullying-related matter. But he had been a bully before, and now that he had become a victim, Belch suddenly began to feel regretful. Knowing that this day would come, he would never have become friends with Henry and the others. Because he was too rebellious, his mother called this psychopath here. It was already late at night, but Belch could only squat on the floor, diligently wiping away the blood, feeling very regretful about what he had done. Outside the window, in the bedroom of a single-family home next to the villa. The boy was sleeping soundly on the bed, holding in his arms a doll as big as his body. The plastic doll with fluffy hair like straw. A small alarm sounded from downstairs. It seemed like some machine had just been touched. The gray eyes of the doll suddenly moved. A horrifying scene happened. The doll slowly sat up, pushed the boy's arm away and jumped out of bed. The stiff plastic face suddenly showed rich and flexible expressions. It climbed up to the window, lowered its head, its toy eyes showing emotional fluctuations almost like a human's. The man lying on the stretcher covered with a white cloth downstairs only showed his head. In the bedroom of an apartment not very high up, the plastic eyes of the doll moved flexibly. It curled its lips into a satisfied smile. "Eddie, you have this day too. When you abandoned me to run away alone, you should have thought about your own fate." The doll muttered to itself as it slowly climbed down from the window, returned to the bed, seemingly turning back into an ordinary toy. No one noticed that in the toy box in the corner of the room, there was a battery lying quietly inside. The next day, at school, Belch received a piece of news. As expected, Henry was taught a lesson by his father. Although the specific situation was not clear, Henry's father went to school to ask for leave for his son. Belch had an extremely tormented day. He did not care about what happened at school. He endured until school was over, holding his school bag, trembling with fear as he walked out of school under Siddle's seemingly unintentional glances. Belch hesitated at the door for a moment because he was afraid of Henry's father. But he was also afraid of Siddle, so Belch still knocked on the door. The one who opened the door was Henry's policeman father, but then Belch entered Henry's house smoothly. When he found Henry in his room, the brown-haired boy was lying on the bed, gasping for breath. With the naked eye one could see the bruises from being beaten on his body. Belch rubbed his sore shoulder, feeling a sudden pang of pain. But he still hadn't forgotten the purpose of his coming here today. After returning the knife to Henry, Belch explained his purpose: "Let's not be friends anymore." Henry happily picked up the knife, hearing that he looked at him in disbelief. "Fuck, are you crazy? Do you dare to say it again?" If it was the Belch of the past, he would probably have started to timidly give in. But now, at home, he still had a good sister, someone he suspected was a pervert murderer, but no one would believe him if he said it. She was seriously threatening his life and safety, but he couldn't escape and let his fate be controlled. Breaking up with Henry might get him beaten, but compared to his older sister, who was the boss of the previous generation and sat at the head of the bed with a knife in her hand in the middle of the night, Belch would definitely choose the first option. Friendship is precious, but life is even more precious. Now that the price of friendship could be life-threatening, Belch did not hesitate to give up that shitty friendship. After leaving Henry's house, Belch somehow breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't until he got home and saw the girl sitting on the sofa watching TV that Belch remembered that he had made an appointment with Henry and the others to go see a Low Shoulder performance tonight. "I got the band name wrong, it's not Submarine." Belch had cut off ties with them now, but just thinking about Low Shoulder, a rock band that had been very popular recently, made him feel an unbearable itch in his heart. He cautiously walked forward, as usual, first glancing to see what show Siddle was watching. It was a news report from a legal channel. The news anchor was reading a news segment. Earlier this morning, fugitive murderer Eddie Caputo was apprehended. Today's news: we would like to thank a lady and a gentleman on XXX, encoded, Street for their help in this pursuit. It was thanks to them that the fugitive was easily caught. Belch didn't expect Siddle to watch this kind of news. Although he felt good about being praised on the news, he didn't want to appear on the Law Channel news at all. He thought for a moment, then said in a low, hesitant voice, "Sister, do you know the band Low Shoulder? The band that used to be very famous. The girl's slender figure was curled up on the sofa, watching the news attentively. Belch continued nervously, they're coming to Derry to perform tonight, can I go see them? I promise I won't drink in the bar. If you're interested, we can go together. If his sister was a big brother at school, she must be interested in these kinds of bands, right? Yeah. As if responding to what Belch was thinking, the girl lying lazily on the sofa casually replied with one word. She glanced at the sky that was starting to darken outside the window, the wind blowing gently, swaying the tree branches. There were very few pedestrians on the dark road. Siddle looked back at the TV screen, coldly saying, I suggest you don't go out tonight. Belch rejected. Although disappointed, he didn't dare ask a second time, dejectedly going upstairs. The girl sitting on the sofa didn't seem to care whether he stayed or went. She was still watching TV. The light from the screen projected patches of light on the girl's snow-white face, sometimes strong, sometimes weak. The light from the screen shone on the transparent plastic eyes of the doll, which lay crookedly next to the boy who was playing with blocks. The news was still playing on TV. It was thanks to them that fugitive Eddie Caputo was easily caught. The picture showed a coded street name. The woman beside him seemed to think it was not good to tell her son these things, so she went to turn off the TV. Belch returned to the bedroom, feeling extremely wronged but unable to vent it. He considered himself obedient enough, but Siddle still treated him like air, and when needed, he was treated as a rag, no matter what, and when he was no longer useful, he would be trampled on. Belch lay dejectedly on the bed, imagining in his mind how lively the music alley must have been at this moment. Until the next day. News of an unknown fire that broke out at the music alley bar, killing dozens of people, caused a stir throughout the town of Derry. In this peaceful and quiet town, the death of dozens of people overnight was undoubtedly huge news. For a while, silence and sadness enveloped the town of Derry. Belch looked at the headline in the newspaper in horror. The blonde girl holding a glass of milk walked past him, calmly glancing at the newspaper, seemingly not too surprised. The people's sorrowful mood did not last long. At first, they thought it was just an unexpected fire, until after the fire, a series of unusual deaths began to occur in the town. Panic spread throughout the town, and in Belch's school, some people also died. Because the atmosphere in the school was very gloomy, the student council president planned to hold a school dance to regulate the students' mood and create a positive atmosphere.